The moment someone tells you a story about who you are, about what you did, about what kind of person you've always been, that story was finished before you walked into the room. They didn't start building that narrative when the conflict happened. They didn't construct it in real time. They had the blueprint ready months ago, maybe years, and they were just waiting for the raw material to justify it. And the second you sit down, hear it out, and start defending yourself against their version of events, you have already accepted the frame. You are now playing their game on their court with their rules, and the only possible outcome is the one they design. Most people lose this fight before they even know it started. They hear the accusation. They feel the heat in their chest. They start explaining, clarifying, offering context. And every single word out of their mouth is a concession, because they are arguing within someone else's story instead of rejecting the story itself. That instinct to explain yourself, it is the most expensive instinct you own. If this channel has ever shown you something no one else was willing to say out loud, then subscribing is not a favor to me. It is a bookmark for the version of you that refuses to be narrated by someone else. That is all. Now let me tell you exactly how this works, and why almost no one sees it happening. Every person you have ever known carries a draft of you in their head. Not you as you are, not you as you see yourself. A version of you that serves whatever role they need filled in their own internal story. Maybe you are the loyal friend. Maybe you are the difficult one. Maybe you are the one who always comes back. These are not observations. They are castings. And here is the part no one says. That draft gets written on day one. The very first interaction you have with someone, they begin sketching a character based on fragments, your tone, your posture, the first thing you said that made them feel something. From that point forward, every interaction is filtered through the draft. What confirms it gets saved. What contradicts it gets deleted or reinterpreted. You never had a fair shot at being seen clearly because the draft was never about accuracy. It was about utility. When someone tells you, "You always do this," they are not summarizing your behavior. They are defending their draft. When someone says that's just who you are, they are not reflecting reality. They are locking the casting in place so they never have to revise it. The first version of the story someone tells about you is never the truth. It is the version that costs them the least to believe. Think about the last time someone confronted you with a version of events that felt warped. Not outright false, warped. Close enough to reality that you couldn't dismiss it, but bent in a direction that made you the problem and them the reasonable party. You probably felt confused, disoriented. Maybe you even started wondering if they were right. That confusion is not a sign of complexity. It is a sign of engineering. There is a specific architecture to a manipulated story, and once you see it, you will notice it everywhere. First, they anchor the narrative to something real, a thing you actually said, a moment that actually happened. This is the foundation. It is undeniable, and it is placed there specifically so that everything built on top of it feels undeniable too. Second, they recontextualize the anchor. They remove the surrounding circumstances, strip the nuance, and assign a motive you never had. Third, they add emotional framing. They describe how it made them feel, which puts you in the position of arguing against someone's emotions, which is a fight you cannot win in front of any audience. By the time they are done, you are not responding to what happened. You are responding to a screenplay where you were cast as the villain before the scene was ever shot. And here is what makes this so dangerous. The people who do this best are not the ones who scream at you. They are the ones who speak calmly, quietly, with a sadness in their voice that implies they have been carrying this for a long time. That controlled delivery is not vulnerability, it is staging. The calm is the weapon. You have been trained your entire life to treat calm people as credible and emotional people as unstable. That training is the exploit. Someone who delivers a false narrative about you in a measured tone will be believed over you, raising your voice to say the truth. Every time, the room does not reward accuracy. The room rewards composure. So what do you actually do when someone hands you a version of yourself that you know is distorted? Most advice will tell you to communicate, to sit down, to hear them out, to find the middle ground. And in some small, low-stakes situations, sure, that works. But in the moments that matter, and the moments where someone has built a case against you, rehearsed the delivery and chosen the audience, communication is a trap dressed as maturity. Because the moment you engage with the content of their story, you have legitimized it. You have treated it as a good faith interpretation that simply needs correcting. And it is not a good faith interpretation. It is a frame. The only move that preserves your position is to reject the frame entirely, not to argue against the details, but to refuse the premise. There is a difference between saying that's not what happened and saying, I don't accept the way you've structured this conversation. The first one pulls you deeper into the narrative. The second one steps outside of it. And most people never make it to the second one because it feels arrogant. It feels dismissive. It feels like something the bad guy would say. That is by design. The social contract around conflict resolution is built to benefit the person who sets the frame. Let's talk about it. Sounds fair. It sounds mature. But the person who initiates that conversation already knows what they are going to say. They have rehearsed it. They have selected which facts to present and which to omit. You are walking into a courtroom where the prosecution has had 6 weeks to prepare, and you just found out about the trial 5 seconds ago. Let's talk about it is not an invitation to fairness. It is an invitation to a stage they already built. Now I want to reverse something I said earlier, because this gets more complicated than a simple defensive strategy. Sometimes the first story someone tells about you is partially right. Sometimes the draft they carry does contain a splinter of truth, buried under layers of exaggeration and self-serving framing. And here is where most people make the second critical error. They feel that splinter, and they collapse. They think, well, if part of it is true, maybe all of it is true. They surrender the entire frame because one corner of it touched something real. No, a story that is 10% accurate and 90% engineered is not a mostly true story. It is a lie with good camouflage. The splinter of truth is not there for your benefit. It is there to make the lie feel inevitable. It is bait the moment you accept the whole narrative because one fragment resonates. You have handed someone else authorship over your identity, and you did it voluntarily. That is the most dangerous kind of loss, the one that feels like honesty. Let me talk to you directly for a moment, because I know who is still watching at this point. You are here because someone in your life has already done this to you, not hypothetically. not in some abstract scenario. Someone sat you down, or worse, they did it in front of people you care about, and they handed you a version of yourself that you barely recognized. And you sat there, and you tried to explain, and you watched their expression not change, because they were not listening. They were performing, and afterward you replayed it, over and over, not because you thought they were right, but because you could not figure out why it worked, why everyone else seemed to buy it, why you looked like the problem even though you knew in some deep and furious place that you were not. I am going to tell you why it worked. It worked because they chose the arena, they chose the audience, they chose the timing, and you walked in thinking it was a conversation when it was actually a sentencing hearing. You were prepared for a discussion. They were prepared for a verdict. The asymmetry of preparation is the single most underestimated weapon in personal conflict. Whoever controls the setup controls the outcome. The content barely matters. This is why some people seem to win every argument even when they are wrong. They are not smarter. They are not more articulate. They are more strategic about when and where the argument takes place. They pick the moment you are tired or distracted or emotionally compromised. They pick the setting where they have allies and you have none. They frame the conversation as overdue, something that has been building for a long time, so that by the time it happens, there is an artificial sense of gravity that makes everything they say feel weighty and considered, even if they made it up last Tuesday. And the cruelest part? The longer you wait to push back, the more their version solidifies. Narratives are like concrete. Wet, they can be reshaped. Dry, they are permanent. Every day you spend not challenging someone's story about you is a day that story hardens into the accepted record. People think silence is neutral. It is not. Silence is confirmation. If someone tells a room that you are selfish and you say nothing, the room does not think, well, they didn't respond, so maybe it's not true. The room thinks they didn't deny it. Your silence is incorporated into their story as evidence. It becomes chapter 2. So now the question becomes, how do you fight a story that is already being told? You do not fight the story, you make it irrelevant. There is a move that very few people have the nerve to execute, and it is this. You stop auditioning for a role in someone else's narrative entirely. You do not argue. You do not explain. You do not defend. You simply act in ways that make their version of you impossible to maintain, not to prove them wrong, not to win them over, but because your behavior becomes so inconsistent with their story that anyone paying attention has to choose between what they were told and what they can see with their own eyes. This is slower, it is harder. It requires you to tolerate being misrepresented without flinching. And most people cannot do it. Most people need to be understood right now. They need the record corrected immediately. That need is what keeps them trapped in the other person's frame. The person who can tolerate being misunderstood for 6 months while quietly making the lie obvious is more dangerous than any debater, any confrontation artist, any silver-tongued diplomat, because they are not playing the short game of winning the argument. They are playing the long game of making the argument irrelevant. But I need to be honest with you about something, because I would be doing the same thing they do if I only told you the version that sounds clean. Sometimes the story someone tells about you is not a weapon. Sometimes it is a mirror you do not want to look into. Sometimes the reason you are so furious about their version of events is not because it is false. It is because it is uncomfortably close to something you have been avoiding. And this is the hardest distinction you will ever have to make. The difference between a manipulated narrative and an honest observation that you hate hearing. Both feel the same in your chest. Both trigger the same defensive response. Both make you want to reject everything the person is saying. The only way to tell the difference is to remove the person from the equation entirely. Forget who said it. Forget how they said it. Forget the audience. Forget the timing. Take the raw claim, stripped of delivery, stripped of motive, and sit with it alone in a quiet room. If it still feels false, it is a frame, and you treat it accordingly. If it lands differently in silence than it did in the moment, then you have something to sit with. Not because they were right to weaponize it, but because the raw material they built on was real. This is the difference between being narrated and being confronted. A narration serves the narrator. A confrontation, even a painful one, can serve both people. The delivery tells you which one you are dealing with. Did they come to you privately, with uncertainty in their voice, genuinely asking if you see what they see? Or did they come prepared, polished, with an audience already sympathetic to their conclusion? The setup tells you everything. The words tell you almost nothing. I want to leave you with one more thing that most people will never hear in their entire lives, because the people around them benefit too much from them not knowing it. You are under no obligation to accept anyone's first story about you. Not your parents' story, not your partner's story, not your closest friend's story. Not the story your boss tells HR, not the story your ex tells mutual friends. Every single one of those stories was built to serve the teller. Every single one omits what is inconvenient and amplifies what is useful. The people who run this world, who actually hold power in rooms you will never see, they all operate on one shared principle that they never say out loud. The first version of any story is a negotiating position, not a fact, not a truth, a position, and you either negotiate or you accept their terms. There is no third option. There is no neutral ground. The moment a story is told, a negotiation has begun, and your only choices are to engage on your terms or to surrender on theirs. Most people surrender because they think resistance is conflict and conflict is wrong. They have been taught that the mature thing is to listen, to absorb, to find the grain of truth, to meet in the middle. And the people who taught them that are the same people who benefit most from that compliance. The middle ground between your truth and someone's lie is still a lie. It is just a lie you helped build. You did not come to this video to feel better. You came because you already know that someone out there is telling a story about you right now, and you are not in the room. And the version of you that exists in that story is not a reflection. It is a construction. The only question that matters is what you do the next time someone sits you down, looks you in the eye, and tells you who you are. Because if you believe the first version, you already lost. And they knew that before they opened their mouth.